The morning my daughter-in-law's rental car disappeared around the corner, my son stood up from his wheelchair for the first time in 6 years. I dropped my coffee cup. It shattered on the tile. Neither of us looked down. My name is Gerald Holt. I'm 67, a retired fire marshal from Savannah. I've spent 30 years learning how fires start, not the loud kind, the ones that begin quietly, inside the walls, while everything on the surface looks fine. That's exactly how my daughter-in-law Diane operated. 6 years ago, my son Caleb was a football coach with 4 regional titles to his name. Then a truck ran a red light on Highway 17 and crushed his driver's side door. The trauma surgeon said the injury was a compression, not a severing, recoverable, with rehab, in 12 to 18 months. Diane flew in a specialist from Atlanta within 3 days. That specialist told us, gently, that the damage was permanent. Caleb would never walk again. I believed it. I moved into their guest room. For 6 years I lifted him, bathed him, wheeled him to breakfast, while Diane ground his nerve medication into his orange juice every single morning with the devotion of a woman who wanted witnesses. The morning she left for a 10-day pharmaceutical conference in Phoenix, the house went quiet in a way it hadn't in years. Then, at 7:43, I heard something heavier than a wheelchair rolling, a shoulder against the wall, a thud that rattled the frames. I ran toward it, the way 30 years of training taught me to. Caleb was standing, shaking, grey, soaked in sweat, but standing. "We have to go," he said, "before it wears off." He talked for 40 minutes in my truck. 18 months ago, he'd found emails on a shared tablet, contact between Diane and the Atlanta specialist, weeks before the accident. He'd started spitting out his medication in secret 23 days earlier, forcing his legs to bear weight alone in the dark while she slept. He'd been waiting for her to leave the house. He directed me to a storage unit on the east side of town. Inside, 11 file boxes and a fireproof safe he already knew the combination to. What I found rewired everything I thought I understood. Caleb's accident had produced a $9 million settlement. Diane told the family it sat in an untouchable medical trust. It didn't exist. She'd funneled it through 3 shell companies into vacation properties and a stake in a private clinic, while I spooned oatmeal into her husband's mouth every morning. I found 4 life insurance policies naming her sole beneficiary, worth $6.2 million combined, and clipped to the last one, an email from the Atlanta specialist, dated 4 days before her trip. "Everything is prepared on my end. Diagnosis documentation finalized on your confirmation. Timeline, 6 to 8 weeks. She wasn't coming home from a conference. She was coming home to finish something. My instinct was to call the police immediately. But 30 years in fire investigation taught me evidence is only as strong as the story around it. And Diane held medical power of attorney. Walk in with this today, and her lawyer hands the room a different narrative. Grieving father, conspiracy theory, a confused patient contradicting his own medical file. We needed her caught mid-act, not accused after the fact. So we went home and built a case, the way I used to work a fire scene, anticipating what came next, not just documenting what already had. I planted 2 dash cameras from my old investigation kit, one behind the kitchen vent, one in the hallway smoke detector housing, both syncing to a cloud server over my personal hotspot, so nothing depended on her home network. She came back 2 days early. Before she said hello, before she set down her bag, her eyes went straight to Caleb's pill organizer on the counter. That told me everything. 30 years taught me what a person looks at first is what they're thinking about most. That night I listened through an earpiece as she called a burner phone at 12:30 a.m. "Everything's in position," she said. "I need the documentation ready by Friday. Let's just get it done. I've waited long enough." I drove to the FBI field office on Bull Street before sunrise. Agent Carla Desmond listened to the recording twice, then called her supervisor at home. They'd been chasing a medical fraud network for over a year and had never gotten a recorded confirmation of intent between the doctor and the beneficiary, until now. But it wasn't enough alone. They needed her caught administering whatever she planned to use. I had to go home, act normal, and let it happen up to the last second, trusting a tactical team stationed 2 blocks away to close the distance in time. I am not going to pretend that was easy. It was the hardest order I've ever followed. Friday evening, Diane came out of the pantry with a nylon case I'd never seen. Not a pill organizer, a syringe. She knelt by Caleb's chair, called him sweetheart, said the new medication would help him rest. She reached for the IV port she'd had installed months earlier, for exactly this moment. The front door came off its hinges. 3 agents were through the opening before the syringe hit the floor. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. For about 4 seconds, she tried to arrange her face into innocence, and then she understood the cameras had caught all of it, and the performance simply stopped. She looked at me with something closer to contempt than fear, like a contractor annoyed at being caught cutting corners. The doctor was arrested the same hour, along with 2 associates. Diane was charged federally: attempted murder, insurance fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. 14 months later, convicted on every count, 38 years, no early release. Caleb's recovery wasn't instant. 3 months before he walked the hallway alone, a year before he sat in the bleachers at his old school, not coaching yet, just watching. His former players spotted him at halftime, and 32 of them climbed into the stands in muddy jerseys, not sure what to say. He told them, "Boys, it's good to be back." They won by 2 touchdowns. I've worked enough fires to know the ones that do the most damage are never the loud ones. They're the ones burning quietly in the walls while everything on the surface looks fine. The people who can hurt you most are almost never the ones you're wary of. They're the ones you've stopped watching entirely, because you trust them completely. If something feels wrong inside a situation that looks right, trust that feeling. A devoted caregiver doesn't need your helplessness to feel useful. The truth, eventually, finds its own way out, even when every door's been locked from the outside.